All right, so you're ready to unlock the secrets of comparatives and superlative adjectives? We're going deep, deep into a beginner English grammar lesson today.
Ooh, fun.
Yeah, it's from Learn English.
Okay.
That's a website by the British Council. And here's the cool part. We've got real comments.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and questions from language learners woven throughout the whole thing. Think of it like getting a backstage pass to how people actually learn grammar.
That's amazing. It's so interesting to see how people actually, learn the language.
Exactly, and I think sometimes we can get bogged down in like, oh, these are the rules, but how do people actually struggle with this?
Right.
So let's start with the basics.
Okay.
Our source defines comparative adjectives as the ones that show us change or make comparisons.
Okay.
Pretty straightforward, like this coffee is stronger than the one I had yesterday, or I'm feeling more confident after that presentation.
Right.
What's interesting here is the way we use than to directly compare two things. It's like setting up a little competition between adjectives.
Right.
Or stronger.
Yeah.
It's like a versus.
Yeah.
It's a versus?
This one versus that one.
And it's not just about individual things.
Yeah.
The source points out how we can also use and with two comparatives to show something changing over time.
Okay.
Like the music got louder and louder.
Right. Right.
Or my to-do list seems to be getting longer and longer.
Yes.
Speaking of getting longer,
Uh-huh.
have you ever noticed how the phrase the adds this dramatic flair when we're talking about two things changing together?
Oh, yeah.
For example, the more you practice, the better you'll become.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a really good point. You're right. It does add a little drama.
It's like a cause and effect chain reaction happening right there in the sentence.
Right.
Now, let's move on to the superlative adjectives.
Okay.
These guys, the source emphasizes that these guys love the spotlight,
Okay.
and they always demand the before them.
Oh, okay.
Like they're saying, hey, I'm the best. Recognize.
Acknowledge me.
Right. Think of phrases like, this is the most delicious cake I've ever tasted. Or, that was the worst movie I've ever seen.
Yes.
Superlatives leave no room for doubt.
Yeah.
They're all about declaring the ultimate champion.
They're very decisive.
Yes. So how do we form these all-star adjectives?
Yeah, how do we do it?
Well, for most one-syllable words, it's as simple as adding ER for comparative and VST for superlative.
Right.
The classics, old, older, oldest, tall, taller, tallest.
Mm-hmm. The easy ones.
Yeah. And if a word ends in an E, we just add R or MEST.
Okay.
Easy peasy.
Yeah.
Like nice, nicer, nicest.
Uh-huh.
But things get a bit more interesting when a word ends in a vowel and a consonant. That's when we double that final consonant before adding ER or NESEST,
Okay.
giving us words like big, bigger, biggest.
Right.
And don't forget about those words ending in consonant plus Y. They like to be a bit fancy. Change the Y to an I before adding ER or VST speed, resulting in forms like happy, happier, happiest.
Right. A little tricky.
Now, what about longer words?
Yeah. What about them?
Well, for most two-syllable adjectives and anything with 3 or more syllables, we keep things simple by using more for comparative and most for superlative.
Okay.
So we would say more interesting or most intelligent, for example.
Right.
But of course, language loves to throw in a few curveballs.
Of course it does. Got to keep us on our toes.
Right. There are some two-syllable adjectives that can go either way, adding ER, EST, or using more most. The source lists words like common, cruel, gentle, handsome, likely, narrow, pleasant, polite, simple, and stupid.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of them.
It's almost like those words are saying, we like to keep you guessing.
We like to be a little mysterious.
Right. The sort of even gives an example. He is certainly handsomer than his brother versus his brother is handsome, but he is more handsome. What do you think? Which one sounds more natural to you?
I think more handsome. I don't know. It just sounds a little bit, more elegant maybe.
More elegant? I like that.
Yeah, I think handsomer is fine, but more handsome is a little more, yeah.
So it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Like if you were writing a very formal paper, maybe you'd want to use more handsome.
Right.
But if you were just talking to your friend, you could say handsomer.
Exactly.
But let's not forget about those rule breakers, the irregular adjectives.
Oh, yeah, those are always fun.
Right. We got the famous trio, good, better, best, bad, worse, worst, and then far, farther, further, farthest, furthest. They completely defy the regular patterns.
They do?
They force us to just memorize their unique forms.
You just gotta know them.
And speaking of farther and further, they have the same comparative and superlative forms.
Yeah.
which can be a bit confusing.
Yeah, it can be.
I remember struggling with those two back in school.
Me too. You always kind of like, wait, which one is it? What's the difference?
Yeah.
Is it distance or?
And it is about distance.
Right.
So farther is usually used for physical distance,
Right.
while further can refer to both physical and metaphorical distance.
Oh,
So you could say, I traveled farther than I expected.
right.
Or let's discuss this further tomorrow.
Perfect. Okay, I think I got that.
Okay, so we've covered the basic rules and even touched on some exceptions. But now let's dive into the real treasure trove,
Okay.
the actual comments and questions from learners. This is where things get really interesting.
Ooh, yes. Let's see what people are thinking about.
Exactly. It's like getting a glimpse into the minds of people as they grapple with these grammar concepts.
Right.
We can see their struggles, their aha moments, and the creative ways they use language.
I love that. I love seeing how people are actually using these things.
Exactly.
Okay, let's get into it. It's really cool to see, like, the things that people are actually struggling with.
Yeah, and how it can be different from what we might think.
Exactly.
So let's start with this question from Margamira
Okay.
about the word little.
Oh, little.
They ask, regarding the adjective little, what are the comparative and superlative forms? If there's more than one, can you explain their meaning and usage?
Okay.
What do you think?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question
Yeah.
because it brings up the fact that sometimes words can have, like, different meanings and therefore different comparative and superlative forms.
Right.
Like little, it can refer to, like, amount or it can refer to size.
Okay.
So, like, I have very little time,
Uh-huh.
or that's a little bird.
Oh, so are you saying that the comparative and superlative forms would change depending on which meaning we're using?
Yeah, exactly. So when little refers to amount, we use less and least.
Okay.
But when it refers to size, we switch to smaller and smallest.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
It's like little is secretly two different adjectives wearing the same costume.
right, exactly.
Okay, here's another question that caught my eye. Nathan9 asks about different ways to express comparisons. They say, I have a sentence like this. John is taller than Mike. In my country, we are taught that the correct way to rewrite that sentence is, Mike is not as tall as John. However, I argue that the sentence, Mike is shorter than John, is the same as the initial one. Please tell me if both are correct. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think they're all correct.
Yeah.
It's just different ways of saying the same thing. Like,
Right.
it's a different emphasis. Like,
Yeah.
John is taller than Mike is just a straight comparison.
Right.
But Mike is not as tall as John kind of emphasizes the fact that Mike is not as tall.
Yeah.
And then Mike is shorter than John is just like a direct comparison of their height.
So it's like choosing different shades of meaning to paint a more precise picture. I love how language gives us these options to play with.
It does. I love that.
Okay, let's turn to a question about superlatives. How to Say asks, should we always use the with superlative forms? Is it a mistake to say, she's the most beautiful woman in this city, he is the smartest boy in the class, or they bought the most delicious cake?
That's a good question.
What do you think? Do you think the vowel is always necessary?
I think it usually is, right?
Yeah.
Especially when you have a phrase like in the city or in the class.
Right.
I think in that case, you definitely need the.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times where you can maybe leave it out.
Okay.
Like if you're just saying something is the most delicious cake,
Right.
I think that's fine.
So it's like saying they searched high and low and finally found the most delicious cake.
Right.
The implication is that they were comparing different cakes, even if we don't explicitly say it.
Exactly.
Now, remember that comment from Ingrid about newer not following the consonant doubling rule?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out there are other exceptions lurking out there.
Oh, no.
That asks, if we learned that adjectives ending in a CBC pattern must be doubled the last consonant and then added with why isn't slower or newer correct?
Oh, that's tricky.
Yeah.
It's because of the vowel sounds, right?
Yes, those vowel sounds.
So even though W is technically a consonant, it acts as part of the vowel sound in those words.
Right.
So, slow and new. So the consonant doubling rule doesn't apply.
It's amazing how much those vowel sounds can influence spelling. It's like they're the silent puppet masters of the English language,
They are, you're right.
pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Picking all the rules.
Right. Let's address Ada Chan 2003's question about using all in comparative phrases.
Okay.
They ask which one is correct. 1, he's the cleverest of all the other students. 2, he's the cleverest of the other students. Or are they both correct? What do you think?
I think both are correct.
Yeah.
But I think adding all just makes it a little bit more emphatic. Like,
Uh-huh.
it's really emphasizing that he's the cleverest out of all of the students.
It's like saying, this isn't even a competition. He's the absolute cleverest.
Exactly.
Okay, ready for another one? Cooler48 asks, fewer and smaller are comparative forms of inferiority, aren't they? Now, I haven't heard the term comparative of inferiority in a while. Can you refresh my memory on what that means?
So comparative of inferiority, it's basically when you're comparing something to something else.
Right.
But you're saying that it's less than.
Okay.
So fewer means less in quantity,
Uh-huh.
and smaller means like less in size.
So instead of saying less or not as much, we use fewer and smaller to be more precise.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's like choosing the perfect tool for the job.
I love that.
Now, this next one is a classic grammar conundrum that always sparks debate.
Oh.
Patty Josie asks, hello, team. The sentence is, he can run faster than me, or he can run faster than I, which is the correct usage. I can run faster than he, or I can run faster than him, which is the correct usage. Kindly guide. Thanks. What are your thoughts on this age-old question?
That is a tricky one.
It is tricky.
So I think technically the correct ones are he can run faster than me, and I can run faster than him.
Okay.
But, you do hear people say he can run faster than I.
Right. Yeah.
And I can run faster than he.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where it's technically not correct,
Yeah.
but people say it anyway.
And I think it might be because they're implying that there's a verb at the end of the sentence.
Right.
He can run faster than I can run.
Exactly.
So they're kind of shortening it.
Right.
But yeah, I think it's good to know the technically correct way.
Yes. It's good to be aware.
And then you can choose how you want to use it in different situations.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder that language is constantly evolving.
It is. It's always changing.
Yeah. And what's considered correct can shift over time and context. Speaking of shifting contexts, we've got even more intriguing learner comments and questions waiting for us. Let's take a moment to gather our thoughts and then dive into those in the final part of our deep dive. All right, we're back, ready to tackle the final round of learner questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
It's amazing how much we can learn from each other's observations.
Right, and curiosities.
Exactly. So let's start with this one from M4400 about using multiple adjectives with a superlative.
Okay.
They ask, hello, I'm trying to figure out why, in an English sentence, if there are multiple adjectives used for one noun, and one of those adjectives is superlative, it seems that all of them must be superlative. For example, my student wrote the following. I bought the 3 large, freshest-looking cabbages to make curry and kimchi. I couldn't explain why that was incorrect. I just knew that I would say 3 of the largest, freshest-looking cabbages. Could one of you provide an explanation?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah, I can see how that sentence could sound a bit off, but I'm not sure I can pinpoint exactly why. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's not necessarily grammatically incorrect,
Okay.
but it just sounds better the other way. Like
Right.
it's more about style and clarity.
Okay.
So in the student sentence saying 3 large, freshest looking cabbages, it kind of implies that there were only 3 large cabbages.
Right.
And those happen to be the freshest looking.
Yeah.
But by using all superlatives, we create a more logical flow.
Uh-huh.
We're highlighting that these cabbages were the best in terms of both size and freshness.
So it's like we're creating a parallel structure to emphasize both qualities equally.
Right, exactly.
Instead of just saying, these were the freshest looking cabbages,
Yeah.
we're saying these are the largest and the freshest looking cabbages.
The cream of the crop.
Right, the cream of the crop. Now, Patty Josie is back with another thought-provoking question.
Okay, let's hear it.
They write, then actually considered as a preposition in modern English. As a result, we use after, then a pronoun in object form. For example, me, you, him, her, us, them, and whom.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting because it makes sense when you think about it.
Right.
Prepositions usually show the relationship between a noun or pronoun
Uh-huh.
and another word in the sentence.
Okay.
So in the phrase taller than me, than is showing the relationship between taller and me. It's like than is acting as a bridge between those two words.
Right, I like that, like a bridge, yeah.
And this shift in grammatical classification reflects how language evolves over time. Words can change roles
Right.
and take on new functions.
Yeah,
And than is a perfect example of that.
definitely.
It's a reminder that grammar isn't set in stone. It's a living, breathing system that adapts to the ways we use it.
I love that.
Now let's wrap up with Ada-chan 2003's final comment.
Okay.
They ask, "Hello, sir. Could you please elaborate on what types of context? Also, I have a vocabulary question. What's the difference between deadly, lethal, and fatal?"
Ooh, okay. A two-parter.
A two-parter.
So to address the first part, remember our discussion about using all in comparative phrases?
Right, like cleverest of all the other students.
Yeah, exactly. So using all just adds that extra emphasis, makes it a stronger statement.
It's like we're saying, out of all the possible options, this one stands out.
Right. This is the best.
The absolute best.
There's no competition.
Exactly. Now for the vocabulary question, what's the difference between deadly, lethal, and fatal?
Ooh, that's a good one. Okay, so fatal means it resulted in death.
Okay.
But deadly and lethal, those describe something that could cause death,
Right.
but didn't necessarily.
So you could say the explorer encountered a deadly snake in the jungle, even if they managed to escape unharmed.
Right, exactly.
But you wouldn't say the snake's venom was fatal,
right,
unless someone had actually died from it.
exactly. Subtle but important difference.
It is subtle. Well, I'd say we've officially reached the bottom of our deep dive into comparative and superlative adjectives.
We did it!
We covered the basics.
Unearthed some exceptions.
Yes, and even explored real-world usage examples.
So cool.
So what's the key takeaway here?
Yeah.
I think it's that understanding comparatives and superlatives
Right,
isn't just about memorizing rules.
right.
It's about appreciating the nuances,
Yeah.
the flexibility,
Your creativity.
right, and the creative ways we can use these words to add depth and precision to our communication.
Absolutely.
So keep an ear out for these adjectives in your everyday life in conversations, books, articles, even song lyrics. And you'll start to see the subtle ways they shape meaning and create impact. And remember, language is always evolving. Don't be afraid to experiment, to question, and to embrace the beautiful complexities of English grammar. Until next time, keep learning and keep exploring.